We had a great conversation today with Emily Sauer, founder and CEO of Ownut, which we described as a sexual donut, but essentially is a way to overcome dyspareunia, which, as you've said many times, is just a fancy word to describe painful intercourse.
So let's talk about a couple of the things that we learned from Emily. I want to tell you, Rachel, I am blown away that this product is recognized and used in 199 countries. Is this something that is surprising to you, being in the business world?
It's a huge number. Now, it could be potentially misleading because you could have 98% of the business in one country, but the fact that she's created a global company, the fact that Emily Sauer has created a global company that is profitable in 2 years is, in my experience, a pretty astounding accomplishment.
Welcome to the Business of the V. Hello, friends and colleagues. I'm Dr. Alyssa Dweck.
And I'm Rachel Braun-Scherl. Each week, we bring you the most fascinating investors, inventors, entrepreneurs, academics, and healthcare practitioners who are making things happen in women's sexual and reproductive health.
If you are a woman, know a woman, have a business, or care about your V health and wellness, fasten your seatbelts and listen in to another informative and inspiring episode.
Hi, Emily.
Oh, this is exciting.
Dr. Dweck and I both had the chance to meet you in person, obviously before quarantine, and we're both quite familiar with the product. But share your story. How do you get to a place where you're basically creating a sex donut?
That I love. You just, I love it. A sex donut is definitely not, well, it is the thought that I started out with. So full disclosure, I have experienced deep pain during sex for my entire sexual existence, but I thought that that was normal, that I am too small, maybe my partner was bigger, and I never spoke about it because seemed like everyone else was having the sex of their lives. And the one time of year that I did bring it up to my doctor, multiple gynecologists over years, I was all but rushed out the door, really. So when no one's really recognizing that I have something that could be fixable, I just blamed myself. And when that starts to happen, painful sex isn't just a physical pain. It's a deeply emotional one where every tinge of discomfort is self-doubt, it's self-critique, it's a sense of failure. And I finally reached a breaking point and I could not do nothing anymore. So I figured if I could just control how deep penetration went, because when it went too deep, I felt physically uncomfortable. If I could control that, then maybe I would like myself a little bit more. So that was the beginning of the DIY adventure in my kitchen and the beginning of a dialogue.
What a great story. First of all, I almost feel ashamed for my profession that nobody took your complaints seriously enough to really address them. So shame on us. Healthcare providers are, I guess, in part rushed for time, in part maybe feel that they don't necessarily have anything to offer to help with this problem, so they dismiss it. But luckily that is changing. So I feel glad about that. So just as a way of introduction, I see in my office all the time what we call collision dyspareunia, a very fancy way of saying sex hurts because there just doesn't seem to be enough room in the depth department to make things comfortable, and mechanically things get bumped around and it hurts. We see this with women who have endometriosis and fibroids, or who may have had surgery for cancers or radiation, and their vaginas become shorter, and we need to create some more distance. How did you come up with this ingenious product?
Yeah. Well, so the interesting thing is that because there are so often delays in diagnosis, and so around 40% of people with sexual concerns or sexual complications don't even ask their physician for help. There's often a lack of diagnosis, which is where I very much fell into. So I, where I started, once I came up with the original idea, just to customize penetration depth, I started going to medical conferences to see if this could be applicable to providers as well, and also to validate a very real concern that I had now learned so many people identified with. When I started talking about it to my friends and strangers, it was very much a shared, they're like, oh my gosh, I have this too. Is this real? Is it just me? What's going on? Or even people of all genders had potentially been with somebody who was in
Sure.
pain and didn't know what to do to help.
What's so fascinating to me about the people in this space, and you're a great example of this is as well, is you saw a problem, you tried to get a diagnosis, you didn't see great solutions, so you created one and then created a business around it. And you say it just casually, I went to medical conferences, but you didn't start in the donut business. You come from a very different background. So talk a little bit about what you were doing before and how you transferred any of those skills to what you're doing now.
I've always found myself, so I worked on as the technician, as the technical director on high-end photo shoots. So I managed all the hardware, software, firmware during these really high-profile shoots. So they would be with celebrities, and we'd travel around the world. Adidas, Victoria's Secret, and I would be the person at the computer when the celebrities would come by and to see the picture of themselves that would be on the front of whatever magazine. So and I would be the communicator between the creative department, the photography department, and I would have to relay that information and then also harbor everyone's stress. So I have found myself in a role where I absorb people's concerns and then help them work together and then feed it back in a positive light. So that very much, and then also making a business out of it. I bought all my own equipment, started renting that out. I did that for 10 years and renting out all my own gear. So it became very much a business.
Interesting. We noted your really catchy Kickstarter campaign, it looked like, to get your business started. And I guess your photography background and all of that collaboration came in super handy with that. Tell us a little about that experience.
Kickstarter was really interesting because so the brand itself is very much me in a way, because just to give a little example, so many people are focused on orgasm and pleasure and physical, everything physical. Whereas when sex causes fear or anxiety, the pressure to have an orgasm just removes the appeal of sex at all.
Are you saying that you have much bigger problems if you can't even have sex that's not painful, that an orgasm is just way far down the line?
I mean, we totally forget what the purpose of sex is at all in light of what culture has made it out to be. This elusive idea of the perfect sexual dynamic or sexual feeling. And we forget to ask, how do we want to feel about ourselves while we're having sex? Why are we doing it all? And, and so from that point of view as the brand, we honored the experience of pain during sex, recognized it, validated it, and then said that there is a product out there that can help. There's a team out here who can support you, and you are not alone.
Thank goodness, because it's obvious that, more than 70% of women have painful sex. So this is not an uncommon problem, just maybe less commonly spoken about than it should be. So
yeah.
You had said that when you were going through it, a couple of things. You said when you were going through it, it was taking a huge emotional toll and you had no one to talk to about it. You had no one to talk to about it. So I can only imagine the testimonials and the things you hear from customers about the experience. So are there ones that stand out as saying, I'm doing something important?
This actually came in on Monday. So early last week. It says, we first heard about Onut when my girlfriend watched a video online. At the time, she wasn't experiencing any pain during intimacy until a few months later. The pain became more frequent and we started having less and less sex and started feeling more distant. So we finally bought it approximately after a year from first hearing about it. We had the rings sitting by our bed for a week, and tonight was the night that she wanted to use them. After finishing, she started to cry, but immediately assured me that it was because she finally had no inkling of pain whatsoever. It was the biggest relief for her, and it made the purchase well worth it.
Wow.
Very moving story. And, you just change the quality of somebody's life, which is incredible.
Is dyspareunia experienced differently depending on the cause?
It can be. So dyspareunia, which is just the fancy way of saying painful intercourse, penetrative intercourse, can be caused by so many different things. Many times it is mechanical, and that's where increasing the length of the vagina one way or another, or the increasing the depth or decreasing the depth that needs to be accommodated can be helpful. But yes, I mean, like I mentioned, growths like fibroids or scar tissue caused by something like endometriosis can absolutely cause pain. In past, I think, much to your point, Emily, doctors would just say, you know what, change up position, woman on top, use a lot of lube, you'll feel better.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is, yeah, that may help for a small percentage of people, and it may be part of a paradigm to help all over the place. But in general, this type of device is very helpful. I will say that in past, practitioners would say, put pillows in between the two partners, or something along that line. But that's a little cumbersome and kind of ruins the mood. I think this adds a real playful aspect to things.
Another one was to roll up a tube sock. You cut off the bottom of a sock and then you roll the tube down your leg, and then you put that around a penetrating partner. And honestly, I give credit to those who tried it, but you'd have to have a really long sock, first of all.
Yes, definitely.
I will say, though, in response to that comment, that oftentimes the assumption is that painful sex is caused by mechanical mismatch, and the questions then stop. It's like, oh, my partner's too big, my vagina is potentially too short, but without actually looking deeper into find the root cause. Whereas if you go to a specialist or a pelvic PT who might actually find out, oh, well, your obturator internus is tight, someone who gets their hands in there and starts actually assessing what the root cause is that is exacerbated by mechanical mismatch.
Well, and I have to that point, comment that I get queried a lot for some media stories, and there seems to be this unbelievable interest in whether a penis can be too large for a vagina. A vagina can be too small, and the truth of the matter is the vagina really is an incredible organ because it changes with arousal. It becomes bigger. It becomes more lubricated and more engorged. So mismatch is actually something that can be helped by this, but it's not always the root cause.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that's very true. I'm curious, how did you market a product such as this when it is a subject matter that may not be the easiest to talk about for couples or marketers or advertisers? So here's this week's Hot Flash. A resounding 75% of women complain of sexual pain or dyspareunia, as we've been talking about. This is kind of an unacceptable level of discomfort. And what I have found is that most women address this issue with avoidance. They avoid their partner. They avoid intimacy rather than addressing the problem, which is pain. So please, it's time to have an open conversation and dialogue with your partner, with your doctor, with your girlfriend, or whomever you typically go to for these intimate issues. But I promise you, it won't be the first time your gynecologist has heard this complaint.
One of the things, so as a patient-founded company, I consider myself originally a patient. Every single piece of our messaging is hopeful and affirmational. And so really what we're doing is just destigmatizing painful sex in general. The other thing that's really interesting is it's quite hard. We've found that 75% of women have pain during sex, and less than half of them even speak up to a partner. So interestingly enough, if you look at our consumer base, around 36% of our customers are male identifying. So it just goes to show how interested all genders are in a product like this, and not just women, because the research has been limited to female-bodied individuals.
What's so interesting is, like in many other aspects of the business of female health, without the conversation, most people don't even know there's an option. So of the 75% who are having pain, half of them don't talk about it with a partner, and then some subset of that looks for a solution. So people are unnecessarily experiencing pain during sex, and perhaps just having a conversation with your partner could help, because then you could look for options.
Well, and what's amazing too is because there's this gap in dialogue between patient and provider. So what patients are now doing is bringing the product into the doctor's office to start that dialogue there too, so that doctors have another tool in their toolkit. So it doesn't, ONA doesn't just stop with an individual who buys it. With this liberation around something that was so previously held tight in our vault of self-critique, now comes out in a place of confidence. And again, the reviews on our website, it's just a slice of life and a slice of pride around menopause, around PCOS, around endometriosis, around postnatal prolapse, around hysterectomies. It's a medical conversation on a website that sells a very simple product to customize penetration depth. The site itself becomes a resource of education. So the marketing is not over-sexualized. It's educational, and people want that.
I think women and men, or anybody for that matter, is really thirsty for knowledge in this type of realm. And so, your website has great educational, direct information, which is so useful. The population where I think I see the most distraught women, because obviously I'm a gynecologist, I only see women in my office, but the breast cancer population, especially the young population who's diagnosed, maybe before they were going to go through a natural menopause. These are women who are truly suffering, and many of them in silence. And I feel like this is part of the paradigm to help regain their intimate lives after they've been through so much, including an instant menopause in many cases, where the vagina becomes dry and uncomfortable and delicate. And many of them are involved in relationships, and they feel like they have a different relationship with their partner because they feel not confident when it comes to their intimate lives.
I mean, you're faced with an entirely new body that you don't understand, that you don't know.
Do you have customers who explicitly talk about being cancer patients and talk about the value that this has added, given that Alyssa said that's such an important population who is potentially experiencing pain?
So one of my favorite stories is there was a woman who had radiation and gynecological surgery from cancer. And I forget exactly what kind it was, but she was a little bit older and she was using ONA with her partner. And I guess they used too much lube on the rings. And and I get he had a particular shaped penis that was a little bit more conical, in which case sometimes the rings come up. There's nothing holding it down, especially when you're using too much lube. So the two of them were avoiding sex for, or just having painful sex. It was a very sensitive part of their relationship. And all of a sudden they just had these rings flying around the room. And then they started purposefully slingshotting them around the room, and they found themselves in hysterics because it was ridiculous. And this sexual experience had just turned into, just laughter. And that's ultimately, sex is a release, and from a very fundamental level, and getting to that place of safety first, and then into that place of adventure and play is where we try to meet patients who are genuinely afraid.
Yeah, I'm laughing only because we've heard stories about diaphragms, which are not that popular anymore, but this form of contraception has often been the UFO flying around the room because women often have trouble getting it in and out, and it can go flying. So now we have a new UFO. But I did want to make mention, when we talk about gynecologic cancers, so cervical cancer is often a disease of young women. Uterine cancer, a disease of older women predominantly, those women have oftentimes sort of diminished their sexual lives naturally anyway, but those with cervical cancer or even with breast cancer who are on the younger side and may have had treatments that are altering their vaginal health really benefit from knowing about something like this. And this is a young population that I think is super affected.
Yeah.
Can you share any breakdown about what your population of customers looks like? Are they 50% male or female? Any identifying information that helps you pinpoint who is really interested in this? Who is buying ONUT right now?
So ONUT is currently in, we were at 199 countries last week. So ONUT has made it around the world. Our major patient populations, like our largest patient populations, are those with endometriosis, bladder pain, postnatal complications, cancer, and menopause.
And how about the breakdown between male and female purchasers?
Yeah, so it is about 36% male identifying.
When you started this business, you were a one-woman band, chief cook and bottle washer, and it sounds like you had that experience from when you were in your previous career. Where are you now in terms of the company and the business?
Great question. And especially during COVID, how has that impacted where we are? So we are a team of 6 now, which is very exciting. We've got all of our basics covered, and everyone's kind of wears all of the hats. So our copywriter also does back-end development on the website, and our publicist also does social media, and our operations also does Amazon. You name it, everyone does everything. As far as the company goes, last year was where we saw a really big growth spurt. The end of last year in particular, we grew 50% quarter over quarter.
Wow.
And we are profitable in under 2 years, which
Amazing.
is wow.
I'm laughing about the chief cook and bottle washer because, started a couple companies with my partner, and I was, in addition to my other roles, I was VP of supplies and VP of travel because I had a Costco card and I liked making airplane reservations. So this idea that, when you have 6 people, first of all, let me just say it is remarkable for folks who are listening to have a business that's profitable in under 2 years.
Thank you for that. I feel like I should wake up every morning and just remind myself that and not get swept away by the day.
Emily, is your product made in the US? Like, did your supply chain get interfered with COVID or?
We did. So we do manufacture abroad, and we did have some supply chain issues because our factory was understaffed. So we were sold out in one product for like 2 weeks. And then we did have these unexpected gaps, and our product for the holidays actually didn't get here in time for the holidays. So, it's like everyone's doing the best they can, and you have to just pick your battles. And I am grateful that during COVID, it really actually forced people to confront their health in new ways, to confront stress in new ways, and to actually communicate with their partner in new ways.
I love that. And we've seen that quite a bit in a lot of the conversations that we're having and in the articles and stories that are written about what has happened to sexuality during the pandemic. So you started with ONUT, and you have a couple of other complementary products. What's next? What's ONUT 2.0?
ONUT 2.0. So so ONUT is definitely, it is its own product. And because it's modular, we have plans for modular add-on rings, which is really exciting. And then we're also, as a company, in a really unique space because ONUT is helpful across so many disciplines. It's helpful for sex therapists, for pelvic floor physical therapists, for gynecological oncology. So
Gynecologists,
gynecologists, OB-GYNs, Urogyns, gastroenterology. It's like you're constipated, sex is painful. It's a kind of across the board. And we're hearing from customers what they want, and we're hearing from providers what's missing. So during the pandemic, it became very, very clear that people were wanting at-home pelvic health support because they couldn't go to their pelvic floor PT. which really shed a spotlight on something we already knew, which is that pelvic floor physical therapy is really not very accessible, and also pelvic specialists are oftentimes inaccessible as well. So how could we as ONUT bridge that gap? We figured, how can we activate these PTs or specialists who are at home and create a platform that offers a sense of accessibility and education that's accessible, action that's accessible for a much broader audience than they had even known themselves. So Pelvic Gym was born. I was like, got on the phone night and day with PTs to create content. And we have a beautiful platform. It's very early stage, mind you, that is a small subscription fee every month. And there's videos that go from comfortable sitting positions for people who have like sits bone pain, to chronic pain management, to stretches for missionary position.
Interesting. That's fascinating. And, in my world, I find a lot of women don't want to visit the pelvic floor PT because it's not covered by their insurance, or because it's inconvenient and it's typically during workday time. So I think an online option is perfect.
And it's scalable. It's really scalable too. There's opportunity to bake out a telehealth option there, to bake out, we could sell ONUT on Pelvic Gym. We do have some difficulty. We can advertise with ONUT. We get about like 50% of our ads through, which is amazing.
It is.
It is amazing. With Pelvic Gym, that's another opportunity for us to address a very unmet need in a medical sense, potentially facilitate early diagnoses, and then offer an ecosystem of services to go with it.
So start from the beginning. Define Pelvic Gym.
Pelvic Gym is an online video platform aimed to democratize access to pelvic floor education and health.
That's awesome. One of the things I love about being in the space is, as an industry, however you define it, and I define it pretty broadly, it seems to me to be very collaborative, and people work together to develop complementary programs. Can you describe experiences where being part of this larger ecosystem has been helpful to you in terms of building ONUT?
Being a part of the larger ecosystem. So I would say the larger ecosystem is the Women of Sex Tech in New York. It is ISWISH, it is ASECT, it is IPPS.
And for those people who don't know, these are networks and organizations that focus on women's health, sexual health, menopausal health.
Absolutely. NAMS, thank you for that. That's the National Association of Menopausal. National Society? There's an S at the end.
North American Menopause Society.
Thank you. Being exposed to and being involved, like deeply integrated into all of these sexual medicine associations, menopause associations, pelvic pain associations, in addition to, on the other side of that is the Women of Sex Tech in New York City. And then you've got Women of Wearables that are based around the world. All of our minds together, it is creating genuinely a wave of innovation. And actually a report just came out saying that the femtech is expected to reach 1.1 billion in revenue by 2024. And that it's basically, it's moving, that it's highlighting this idea that solutions targeting early diagnosis and that leverage connected healthcare services, so that multidisciplinary approach, these technologies can reduce healthcare costs, decreasing the overall cost burden to the country while elevating healthcare standards and quality of life for women.
Do you think we can get to a slogan that says orgasms are good for the US economy?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I think we're getting closer to it.
Well, you know what they say, sexual health and general health are, intricately intertwined. And I think this is the type of thing that really brings that to people's attention.
Yeah, I did want to emphasize that. One of the things that's so interesting about how you talk about the development of the product and how you talk about the customers is you don't ever talk about painful intercourse without including the emotional toll that it takes. And from being in this space, and Alyssa seeing patients and having studied for years in this space, we do know one of the most important things to understand is that women's sexual response is an intersection of so many aspects of her life. It's physiological, it's psychological, it's social, it's emotional. So I love that you're pushing that dialogue and that awareness. And we've certainly seen during COVID, at least some greater awareness about the number of elements that affect a woman's health and affect her sexual health.
Yeah, the interesting thing also when you look at a customer journey, it's like, when does someone go to a doctor? When does someone look for a product like Donut? It's generally when something's broken, when something goes wrong. So it's interesting that we have to get to the point of a relationship falling apart in order to take our health seriously. We have to find ourselves in a pandemic to realize that something is maybe worth fixing. Or not fixing because it means that something's broken, but something worth addressing.
Well, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to see you. We love your energy and enthusiasm. So thrilled to hear that the business is going so well.
Yeah, likewise. You guys look great. I'm happy to hear that you're doing well.
Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast at businessofthev.com for the latest trends and trendsetters in women's health and business.